Before we begin this episode, I just want to take a quick second to say thank you so much to everyone who has supported this podcast so far. The reception has been incredible, and needless to say, the amount of feedback I've received this past week has gone beyond anything I expected. So thank you all so much for sticking around. I hope you all have a great time. All right, let's cue an intro. Good afternoon and good evening to you. My name is Dayzee and you're listening to my secret podcast here on this beautiful Friday. I don't know what the weather looks like outside for you today, but let me just tell you, the fact that you're here listening to me has already made my day a lot better, and I hope I can make your day a lot better too. But it's already a great day because it is Friday. Finally! You made it all the way to Friday. Congratulations. Friday is, in all honesty, my favorite day of the week. And I know what you're thinking. Dayzee, your favorite day is a Friday? A work day? Why not Saturday or Sunday? Well, I love Fridays personally. Personally, I love Fridays because it's that day of anticipation. You can feel the weekend. You can feel the weekend coming around the weekend coming, that sounds terrible. You can feel the weekend just around the corner, and you've been waiting for this day the whole week. You can finally look back on all the work you've done throughout the week, and it's finally time to relax, to settle down, have a nice cup of tea on the balcony, meet up with your family, have a great dinner at night, and celebrate the freedom. Yes. I love Fridays. It's that nice day of anticipation, and I love it. And whether you're listening to this in the morning or in the afternoon, I just want to say, happy Friday to you. So what are we doing today? Well, I figured for a beginning episode, a starter episode of this podcast, I wanted to introduce some of my favorite books to you. Yes, just you. I wanted to talk about some of my favorite books that I have read in the recent years. And you might see a common theme around these books. They are kind of something else. One is a classic, an old classic, Japanese classic. The other I would call a modern day classic. I want to start off by reading the back of this book I have in front of me first. I'm not even going to say the title or the author just yet. I just want you to close your eyes, relax, and take a deep breath. You know, take in that Friday air, Friday atmosphere. You can feel the weekend coming. Oh, it's so nice. You can feel the freedom. You can already taste that nice glass of red wine in your hand as you're sitting there in the couch looking back on the week. It's amazing. It's life. And now I'm gonna ruin it because this book is traumatizing. Portraying himself as a failure, the protagonist of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human narrates a seemingly normal life, even while he feels himself incapable of understanding human beings. Obayusu's attempts to reconcile himself to the world around him begin in early childhood, continue through high school, where he becomes a clown to mask his alienation, and eventually lead to a failed suicide attempt as an adult. Without sentimentality, he records the casualty. Wait, what? No, sorry. Do that again. Without sentimentality, he records the casual cruelties of life and its fleeting moments of human connection and tenderness. So, No Longer Human is a novel from 1948 written by Osamu Dazai. It consists of 3 notebooks as well as a prologue and an epilogue. It is actually fairly short. A fast reader could probably read this in a day. However, I would highly recommend, if you read this, you should take your time with it, because it is really worth it, in my opinion, to not just read it out loud, but take your time with like getting into the protagonist's head. Sorry. But No Longer Human is basically, I mean, in short terms, it's a book about a man who all his life feels super alienated from everything. His family, his relationships, his friendships, just everything surrounding him, everything in society is kind of foreign to him. And because he's so alienated from everything around him, he actually lives a life of extreme fear. He's so confused about a lot of things in the book. Throughout the book, we follow him throughout life and throughout the friendships he makes, the relationships he has, his work as an artist, his relationship to alcoholism and drug abuse. And the most fascinating thing about this book is the fact that, I mean, in my opinion, the most fascinating thing about this book is how personal this book obviously is. Because the moment you look up anything about Osamu Dazai and the life he led, you can definitely tell that he took a lot of his own life into this book. It is such a personal book, like in my mind, and that's just, you know, my interpretation of it and how I like to read it. I like to read this book as a final letter from the author, because this was the last book that he published, I'm pretty sure. And I mean, I don't know if I should say too much about what happened to the author and what he did before this book was published, but I will tell you this. If you decide to read this book, just keep in mind that this book is full of very heavy subjects, and it is probably some of the most personal and some of the most intimate literature you can read. And I think it's a very essential book to read if you want to get into the mind of an artist. I don't know if it was his intention to show people what it's like to be an artist. I don't think necessarily that was the case, but I do think the book tries to portray the idea of what it's like to live in a world as an artist. I want to read you a short passage from the book. It's from the first notebook, and it might actually be on the very first page of that notebook. And I want to read this to you because it's the first example of how this protagonist from the very beginning feels alienated from everything around him. It's kind of supposed to solidify this idea that he sees something that he doesn't quite understand, but he finds it beautiful, and the moment he sees what it actually is, it's not as beautiful anymore. It's a very interesting scene. It's a very simple scene. So the protagonist is at a railway station, and he sees a bridge that is supposed to make it possible for someone to go over the train tracks, basically. He sees this as a kid, and he says the following: "I was convinced that the bridge had been provided to lend an exotic touch and to make the station premises a place of pleasant diversity, like some foreign playground. I remained under this delusion for quite a long time, and it was for me a very refined amusement, indeed, to climb up and down the bridge. I thought that it was one of the most elegant services provided by the railways. Later, when I discovered that the bridge was nothing more than a utilitarian device, I lost all interest in it." So, this is just one example of how the protagonist sees something in the world and he is very fascinated by it. He thinks it's beautiful because he doesn't understand its purpose. But the moment he sees that it has an actual purpose, then it's not as beautiful anymore. And this is just my own interpretation, obviously, but I like to believe that what the author is trying to say with this is that art doesn't necessarily have a purpose. When someone makes art, it just exists because you made it exist. It doesn't have a greater purpose. It doesn't exist to do anything. It's the very essence of when someone looks at a piece of art and say, what were you trying to do with this? What were you trying to accomplish with this? And that's when the artist says, I wasn't trying to accomplish anything. I was just doing it. I was making something. I didn't do it with a purpose in mind. I just felt like doing it. I just felt like painting this painting that you're looking at right now. I don't know what it means, because the artist's job is not supposed to tell you what his art means. You are supposed to put meaning into it. You are supposed to explain it with your own perception. That's what makes art so cool, because it can be something completely different for someone else. And it's one of those things that I like about literature, for one. Sometimes we put meaning into a character's behaviors and we say that they are bad. Some other people might say that they're good. Some people might say they're misunderstood. We all interpret things from our own perspective. It really shows the layers of human existence. I love it. So whenever I find a book I really like, I usually go on the app Goodreads, and I'm not sponsored by Goodreads or anything. I just feel like one way to show you guys what I really feel about this book is by reading my initial Goodreads review. And it's pretty long, but I think it really encapsulates what I thought of the book when I first read it. And by the way, I don't intend on spoiling these books too much. I really don't want to give away too many plot points of these books, because I essentially want to recommend them to you so you can read them for yourself. So I guess what I'm trying to achieve with this is to just kind of tease you a bit about these books and kind of like pique your interest a little bit when it comes to these books, because I do feel like they're worth reading a lot, especially if you're like me and you like to read literature that forces you to reflect on your own personality and your own views of society and stuff like that. Anyway, let me try and read the Goodreads review I made last year when I first read this book. So, here we go. Oh my goodness. This book was unlike anything I have ever read. I had so many feelings and thoughts throughout the entire book. This book is incredibly thought-provoking. I'm honestly at a loss for words. Well, clearly not. No Longer a Human can be considered a comprehensive review of what it's like to have social anxiety and how your anxiety can lead to romances, affairs, and addiction. I think a lot of people can feel alienated from society because of the overwhelming amount of connections we can have. However, even with the many connections we have in modern society, a lot of young people still feel alienated and lonely to the point where concepts like relationships, friendships, love, and family is in question. Not to mention its literary style. Every sentence feels like poetry to me. I felt the urge to read every sentence out loud. Our protagonist is far from the most sympathetic person in literary history. However, I don't think that he is necessarily supposed to be likable. Many people are going to read this in this day and age and think, this guy's super rude. This guy is a straight up sociopath. This guy is misogynistic. Because yeah, he might be. But I'd like to believe that in this day and age, we're also able to contextualize this piece of art and consider what time it was written. And moreover, with the ever-growing attention to mental health that people seem to exhibit these days, we should be able to appreciate literature like No Longer Human, which thoroughly depicts what it's like to feel so disconnected from other human beings and human behavior that 1, you feel ashamed to even exist, and 2, you consider humans to be more like animals that could tear you apart at any minute. No Longer Human is a character study that should be getting more attention, taking the online fascination with mental health into consideration. That was a long review, past Dayzee. Lost for words my ass. So I think it's about time that I go on to the next book, which you're gonna find is very similar in a way. As a child, Natsuki believed she was an alien, a different species to her Earthling family and classmates. She hoped a spaceship would come down and take her home. Now she lives quietly in an asexual marriage, pretending to be normal. But the buried horrors of Natsuki's past are pursuing her as she flees the suburbs for the Nagano Mountains and a reunion with her beloved cousin Yu. She wonders what it will take to escape the Earthlings. This is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, I think. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. I think that's what her name is. Sayaka Murata, she is known for being a Japanese woman writing about Japanese women. And one thing that all her female leads have in common is that they feel kind of different from everyone else. The main thing that makes these women feel different from everyone else, it's their perception of what makes a good life, I guess. Sayaka Murata likes to put focus on the purpose of being a woman in Japan, I think, mainly. I don't know. All of her characters are Japanese, so I would say that is her main focus. But, okay, so in Earthlings, we have a character. Just like in No Longer Human, we follow her throughout her life and adulthood. Natsuki, she goes... Well, I'll tell you about the first part of the book as a little teaser. I read this in the beginning of this year, so it's a little more clear in my mind what it was about, and it has left a huge scar on me, by the way. It was very traumatizing to read. But okay, I'll tell you about the first part of the book. Natsuki, she goes with her family to a mountain to visit some family. She's going to visit her cousin and her uncles and aunts. She goes there, and basically Natsuki is convinced that she is, in fact, an alien. Like, no joke. She thinks she's an alien. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, if you know the cover of this book, you know that there is this cute little hedgehog plushie on the front. That it's so iconic. It's very iconic. But yeah, she has basically found this little plushie on the ground somewhere at school, I think. And she grabs it from the ground and it starts talking to her. And the little hedgehog basically says, I know what you are. I know you're an alien. And one day, your ship is going to come and pick you and me up, and we're going to our home planet. Now, it's not really explained if Natsuki actually hears a voice, or if it's just like her imagination. It's not really that clear to me what it is, which one it is, but either way, she believes she's an alien. She goes to... It sounds so... Yeah, she believes she's an alien. It sounds so funny to me. Anyway, she goes to this family gathering. She sees her cousin, Yu, that she's very close to, and actually, she is kind of in love with him. Yeah. I told you all of these books were going to have trigger warnings, content warnings. They are basically in love with each other. I mean, they're like kids, by the way. They're both kids. It's not like you is, an adult cousin and they're in love. No. They're both the same age, and they're both, underage, probably. Probably. They don't know what they're doing. But she goes to you and says, yo, I'm actually an alien. And I think you and we are actually both aliens. And one day our ship is gonna come down and take us away from here. And you is like, that's lit, He's like, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, they are very, very close. And I guess, as much as I like to say that this book is very much like No Longer Human, I would say that Earthlings is a little more out there, a little more, absurd, absurd to the point where it's like hilarious, maybe not when you find out that, she's going to have sex with her cousin. Yeah, that part is kind of weird. But yeah, it's very funny. It's trying. I don't know if the author is trying to be funny, but it's definitely absurd. And Sayaka Murata, she is known to be absurd. Her other, she made like a short story compilation that I also really like called Life Ceremony, and that one is also just full of absurdity, but it's kind of satirical. It's trying to like make a point about stuff in society, right? But the main point in Earthlings, and this is why I think this is, a modern day classic. This book, Earthlings, is my Jane Austen. It's feminist literature. And I'll tell you why. One of the main reasons why I call this feminist literature is because it focuses on the issue of being a human, it focuses on the issue of being a female who does not want to have kids, who doesn't want to get married, who doesn't want to have kids. She just wants to live her life. I feel like this book has a very, very profound way of picturing what it's like to be a woman in society who just doesn't want those normal, quote unquote, normal things like getting married and having kids. She uses the symbolism of a factory. She calls the whole world a factory. It's just a baby factory. Like when she sees her family talking to her about, oh, you gotta get married and you gotta have kids, she sees it as if this whole concept of getting married, having kids as a woman, it's just brain dead nonsense. Everyone is manipulated. Everyone is just brainwashed into giving away their body to having a family, essentially. And the main character, she might seem like a bitch for thinking that way, right? Because, just because you get married and have kids, that doesn't mean that you're brainwashed. It doesn't mean that you can't think for yourself. Like, some people are just happy with those kind of things, right? In that, in that frame, in that picture frame. A lot of women like that kind of picture frame, that kind of life for themselves. But I understand what she means. I get it. Because like all my life, I feel like I've been surrounded by women who did the same thing. They went into a relationship and they had kids. That's the only thing they're focused on. Whereas I'm someone who'd like to think that there is more to life. Now, the reason why our main character Natsuki has such a problem with it, for her it's mainly about the ownership of her own body. The whole idea of getting married to a guy and having a kid, it's scary to her because she feels like she's losing her own body. Like she feels like she is selling her body off to a concept that is so unoriginal and so scary to her. Like It's just this one big baby factory. Like, that's what she sees society as, Natsuki, that is. And it's very fascinating. I really like that discussion a lot. Because for years, it has been like that. And in Japan, it seems like it's still like that in some places, at least. If you're looking for like a feminist piece of literature that isn't Jane Austen, that isn't Pride and Prejudice or Little Women, I highly recommend Earthlings. But keep in mind, it comes with content warnings. There is a lot of... But at the same time, I don't want to tell you too much. I think I've told you enough already. I don't want to tell you too much because I want you to go into it just blind. I want you to go into it blind as a mole because that's what I did. And I loved it. I was so impressed by it. I was very close to not finishing the book, actually, because there is a moment... in chapter 2, I think, where it got a little bit nasty. And I actually said out loud to my partner, I don't know if I can finish this. I don't know if I can finish this. This is too much. I mean, I read absurd books all the time. I like to read stuff that is horrific or out there or, provocative and stuff like that, but this got like a little too nasty for me, even for me. But I'm so glad that I got past that point because it got so good. Okay, so yeah, I think that's what I have to say for Earthlings. Again, both these books are for some reason by Japanese authors. I think Japanese authors just know how to do shit right sometimes. Well, that does it for the first episode of My Secret Podcast. But before I go, I would just like to ask you, dear listener, if you could only recommend one book for the rest of your life, what would it be? Feel free to tell me in the comments or on Instagram or on TikTok. You can find me on all different sorts of platforms. Leave a follow on Spotify or subscribe to the YouTube channel. I hope to see your beautiful face in the next one. See you later, alligator. Bye.